And there is a temptation that I think all of us have. I think it's human nature. We have someone, and there is something about that someone that we admire. We can admire someone else's strengths without feeling that requirement to adopt it for ourselves. I can fully appreciate that there are some leaders who are far more motivational and inspirational than I am. Hey, I'm more than willing to let them be at the forefront and let them be that motivational, inspirational leader. And then I'll step in behind them and help get things done.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Rees, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Shawn Richards about rapid fire leadership insights, developing emerging leaders, and why a strengths-based approach can transform the future of leadership. Shawn is a business executive with over 30 years in the business world, having worked for and with small businesses for much of that time as either a COO or a CFO. Shawn is committed to business success at all levels. Now, with a deep focus on human capital of a company, he believes leaders at all levels can inspire the best of the people they lead. He has found tremendous passion in helping business leaders develop future leaders. Shawn is the host of the Team Engagement Podcast, a podcast that discusses leadership and teams. He is also author of the best-selling book, Rapid Fire Leadership, and it's a book that helps leaders generate powerful new strategies on leadership. Shawn recently launched the First 50 Project, a new program that invites high-potential emerging leaders to engage in a strengths-based leadership development program called the Sapphire Sky Leadership Development System. Shawn is a baseball fanatic, and y'all, that is spelled with a PH, and he is a fan of the Philadelphia Phillies since childhood. Shawn follows the Phillies regularly and cheers them on in good years and bad, and he lives in Utah with his wonderful wife and twin daughters. So welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Shawn. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, thanks, Bethany. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about everything leadership and maybe even a little bit of baseball in there. We'll see.
That is awesome. Well, I actually want to start with baseball. I love that you describe yourself as a Phillies fanatic with the PH. You know, how you're cheering them on in good and bad, because I get it. That is loyalty. I am a diehard Cubs fan, and they're actually known as the lovable losers. And I have to confess, I actually cried when they won the World Series in 2016.
I'll bet.
I'm going to claim that I was tired because they were playing the LA Dodgers on the West Coast, and it was like midnight when I was watching that game, but I did cry when they won. So I understand your loyalty.
Well, I'm glad that you have such affection for those wonderful Cubbies, because I have a great respect for the organization and have not any necessarily close ties, but enough that I admire the Phillies, and I have to, in a very fun, gentle ribbing way, I have to thank you for letting us have Kyle Schwarber, because he is having a great year, and I know he was with the Cubbies when they won, and but we're happy to have him, and I hope that we can go the distance this year. We'll see.
And he is a great, when he hits it out of the park, it's amazing. And don't you find, me following the Cubs, you following the Phillies, that our love of a team, good or bad, that actually there's a lot of leadership lessons in learning about perseverance through those seasons of droughts. We had over 100 years of drought.
Yeah,
not winning. But perseverance, I really think there's a huge leadership thing when it comes to sports. Would you agree?
Oh, completely. I'm sure you do too, Bethany, but I've got a little book in mind. It's probably about fourth or fifth down the row here, about lessons of leadership that we learn from sports, all different kinds of sports. I'm obviously a baseball fan and fanatic. I do love football quite a bit. And there's just, in all sports, there's some great leadership lessons to be learned. And we could probably spend another hour just talking about that. But yeah, I agree that there is a certain resilience, a certain patience sometimes while you are building and developing, to say, well, we may not win the World Series this year, but let's just focus on having a winning season and then the playoffs, and then we can take a look at the championship type endeavor. But yeah, I agree with you completely. A lot of leadership and personal development type lessons that we can learn from sports. I love it. That's why I love sports.
Amen. I love it too. I played, back in the day, but I found the older I get, the better I was in my head.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm the same way.
Oh man. Well, people are tuning in, not for our baseball chatter, which we love, and we could totally have another episode on that. But let's talk about leadership. In the bio, when I was reading, you talked about human capital. I am huge in defining kind of what we're talking about, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So can we just start off with what do you mean by human capital, as in
Sure.
you support that? What is human capital?
It's an interesting idea for those who are familiar with accounting principles, and I'll be very broad and very general on this. I won't go too deep. But when you look at a balance sheet, which is a list of your assets and balanced against your liabilities, what you owe, right? We see on the asset side all of the tangible and sometimes intangible assets that belong to a company. And those are good. How much money you have in the bank, real estate, equipment, whatever else it may be. What's interesting to me is one of the most important items, one of the most important assets are the people
Mhm.
in the organization from top to bottom, everybody. And yet we don't list that on the balance sheet. We don't list that as part of the value of the company, which is the human capital. When you step back and you think about it, first of all, not only are those people doing most of the doing within the business, whatever that is, whether it's manufacturing or technology, whatever it is, but they're also the ones doing a lot of the innovating, coming up with new ideas. And so when you invest in your people, that human capital is very, very difficult to measure, but it is very, very real and it's very valuable. I do some exit planning as well. And when we work with clients, we're helping them to understand the importance of investing in the human capital. When the owners are looking to exit, makes their company look a lot more attractive if a prospective buyer can see really strong leadership and
Mhm.
culture and functionality within the company that's due mainly to the people in it, not just the systems and the software that helps them be efficient. It's really more about the human capital that's in there and what they bring to the table. And that's what I mean by human capital.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much for defining that. Just to summarize all of it, leadership really is about the people. Most organizations provide a service, create a good, complete a task, but it's people that do those things. And the more that we pour into the development of our people, the better the outcome is of those services, goods, and production or manufacturing or whatever it is. And so thank you for defining that. So now let's transition a little bit. I'm excited to dive into your book, Rapid Fire Leadership. I love it that you have had a lot of conversations. Whenever I say a lot, over 400 conversations. And you have condensed all that wisdom into this book. And I am a wisdom seeker. I want to learn from other people so desperately so I don't repeat the same mistakes, right? I make my own mistakes and I'm hoping to learn there. But I think true wisdom is also learning from other people. And
Mhm.
so I know that you have interviewed and talked to all these people. Can you just talk to us a little bit about rapid fire leadership and some of those nuggets of wisdom that you've learned through those conversations?
You bet. Happy to do that. Yeah, the podcast, I started the team engagement podcast a little over 5 years ago. It was back right at the beginning of the pandemic. And we had a lot of people sitting around with not much to do. I started the podcast for multiple reasons, but I quickly realized how much I enjoyed just talking to other people, just like you and I are doing right now, Bethany. And so I adopted what I call a rapid fire approach in the podcast. We go fairly quickly. I ask 5 questions and I let each of the guests, the same 5 questions, and I allow the guests to respond in different ways, meaning that they are all going to have different ideas, know what it means to be a strengths-based organization, or how do you communicate values and vision to your company effectively, whatever it may be. And so every year I would change the questions. And so that allowed for a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different ideas. And so we moved fairly quickly through each of the podcasts. There are 10 or 15-minute episodes, so they're pretty short. And so I would kind of warn the guest ahead of time, this is going to be kind of a rapid fire approach. We're going to go pretty quick. Um, and so the book is as you mentioned, kind of a compilation of the ideas that I felt best resonated and were most applicable to leaders of all levels, but especially those a little bit younger leaders, the emerging leaders that are really anxious to learn as quickly as they can. And so the book is laid out in the same type of format where we have the question. Each chapter is one of the questions that I've asked over the years. And
Mhm.
then it gives some tidbits, just little clips, just little short quotes from some of the guests that have been on over the years. And I've been so fortunate and very blessed. I think at the time that I wrote the book, and it's since been published, I think it was 17 different countries, including the
Wow.
United States, all around the world. Hundreds of leaders, all different kinds, all different backgrounds, male, female, a little bit older, a little bit younger, entrepreneurs, senior executives, all different countries, all different backgrounds. It's fascinating. And yet, despite the really diverse backgrounds, it's amazing how the same general ideas about helping each other and leading
Mhm.
people that you talked about a minute ago, they always seem to come together. Even though we all have these different backgrounds and ideologies and beliefs and value systems, we still manage to come together. And so I'm obviously proud of the book, but I've got to be careful because I can't take too much credit for it. Yes, I assembled it, but I have to give some credit to all of those great guests that were willing to come and share of their experience and their wisdom. So that's a short version of the what the book Rapid Fire Leadership is all about.
That is amazing. And there's a couple of things that I noticed as you were explaining the book. Obviously, I've looked into it and know a little bit about the book, but just hearing you talk, number one, I love the psychology behind the perspective of me as the reader. you know, you can read novels. I mean, like thick novels, and I'm talking nonfiction here for leadership growth. And it's just so much to take in. Like my brain hurts. And it's really, high level concepts, lots of theory. And I'm constantly asking, how do I apply this? And so immediately the way that you wrote the book, short tidbits, it's like chunking. It's this slow, I can drink it in, I can soak it in. It's like, here's wisdom in a sentence, here's wisdom in a quote, and it's a lot easier to digest. And so, one, thank you for me as the
Welcome.
reader for making it easy to read and therefore apply in my leadership. But another one, I love that you were talking about the diversity of thought, the diversity of backgrounds and all that stuff. But then you mentioned, and now I want to dive into this, you mentioned, man, but when you get down to it, there's a lot of similarities. What kind of themes did you notice running through all of that wisdom coming at you through that podcast and now in your book? What are some of those themes that we could glean from there for us and our listeners today on this podcast?
Yeah, great question. And you mentioned it at the top of the podcast. It's about people. It's about people. When we lead, and we all have a different way of leading, but ultimately it's all about people. You may be a type of leader that's more motivational, more inspirational, more of that cheerleader, rah, 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 let's go, let's go, let's go. And there's a very appropriate place because people need that inspiration. Meanwhile, you may have a little bit of a different type, or a different person may have a different type of leadership where it's what we might call servant leadership, that they're a little bit more invested one on one with each individual and really focused on nurturing and that other person's growth. Both are needed, both are effective. You may have somebody else that's more of a kind of an implementer, getting things done. Let's go, let's go, let's go, kind of task driven. And there's a place for that as well. And so you have these different styles of leadership that all blend together. And that's the important part for all of us to understand, is to understand what your strengths are and then being able to really focus on the people that you serve. And to me, that is the one piece to always be thinking about, that if you want to be a leader and not just a leader by title, we're talking about an effective leader that influences people for good. Learn about people. Learn about
Mhm.
what drives their decision making, what motivates them, what their strengths are, what they can contribute, what they can bring to the table. When we start to focus more on people, and not always, it's important to have operations, it's important to have efficiencies, it's important to have profitability and all of those things, but don't forget about the people. It's always about people. And it's also and this is an interesting realization for some leaders. If they've led a team of pretty much the same people for any fairly substantial length of time, let's call it 5 years, there's no real number to it, but they've worked with them for a long time. Sometimes those leaders forget that those people evolve over time and that their motivations, interests, even their strengths may change a little bit. And so you have to be ready as a leader to adapt yourself and with your people. And I call it dynamic leadership, to be able to adjust and pivot if you need to. That's, again, it's all back to the people, and knowing that people grow and evolve over time. And it's kind of a sad thing, but it certainly happens. You may have somebody on your team that enjoyed a strong marriage for a long time, but now 5, 10 years later, they're going through a divorce. And that's a really hard time. That's going to affect their work and their life. Being aware of that. There's so much more that we could go over on those details, and I'm happy to go as deep as you want it to be. But to me, it's always about understanding whatever style, whatever role you have, it's about people.
Man, I love that you're diving into that. And let me throw out the opposite parallel. What you're also saying is, I do not have to be like everybody out there. As I read, John Smith, I'm just throwing out a generic, John
Yeah,
Smith and Jane Smith's book on leadership, it is wisdom coming at me, but it still has to be internalized by me and then transform me from the inside out. And I'm still an individual. I am not John Smith. I am not Jane Smith. And I love that you're reminding us that yes, there's so much wisdom out there, so many different ways to be a leader. So you've got to dive deep into yourself and saying, what do I bring to the table? What strength do I have? Knowing that I don't have all the strengths, knowing that
right.
it's okay that I don't have the strength that, Johnny or Susie does, but also recognizing that they have a strength that they bring to the table and how can I build that up? And I love that you're reminding us of that because we can so often look at other people and say, I have to do exactly what they're doing, exactly the way that they're doing it. And that's just not the truth. That will actually have you wearing a mask, which will burn you out quicker.
Absolutely.
Man.
Yeah, it is. It's dangerous. It's kind of that comparison is the thief of joy,
Hmm.
because the reason why I named the podcast that I host Team Engagement is because that's part of your role as a leader is you have the opportunity not just to engage one-on-one with the people that you lead, but to help them engage with each other in a team format. And one of the best ways to do that is to help them see not only what's great about them and what they bring to the table, but what about every other person, what they bring to the team, what they bring to the company. And when you understand that and you open your eyes a little bit and are willing to accept that, hey, I contribute in this way, but someone else contributes better in a different way.
Hmm.
It's not that we're not trying to compare in a negative way. We're simply trying to say, let's find the best of what's within us and develop that. And there is a temptation that I think all of us have. I think it's human nature. We have something, well, let me rephrase. We have someone, and there is something about that someone that we admire. We can admire someone else's strengths without feeling that requirement to adopt it for ourselves. I can fully appreciate that there are some leaders who are far more motivational and inspirational than I am. I can admire that, I can respect that, but that's just not me. I already know that because I've done a number of assessments on myself, and I can do that to a degree, but that's not my strength. It's not
Hmm.
my strength. I can step into that role when I need to, but other people, it's just natural for them. And when they can develop that, hey, I'm more than willing to let them be at the forefront and let them be that motivational, inspirational leader. And then I'll step in behind them and help get things done. And that they may not be as strong as kind of going into the details. So just
Yeah.
a few additional thoughts there.
That's awesome. And the parallel that I hear, and my brain works in parallel because what I have come to learn, the ultimate truth of this podcast, and that's why I have it in my intro. Leadership that we talk about and we learn from to apply at work can be applied at home. And so,
Yes,
as you were talking, the parallel that I had for the home leadership is think about marriage. Chances are you didn't marry somebody just like you,
that's
and
right.
so they have different strengths, you have different strengths. And so often the battle in marriage is I'm trying to make the spouse more like me. And the truth of the matter is, my husband will never think like a middle aged woman. He's not
That's
a woman.
right.
And
Yep.
so I have different strengths and he has different strengths. And it's about bringing out the best. Where he is strong, he is the leader. And I love what you were saying. You modeled that so beautifully. When somebody has a strength, let them take the lead and you come in as a support to help. It's so beautiful. And then going back earlier, you were talking about recognizing if you were the leader of a team for, let's say, 5 years, that was the example you gave. And you got to recognize that they are going to grow and develop and they're going to need different things. How much is that your children? Your the way that you're parenting a toddler is completely different than the way you're parenting a pre-adolescent and a teenager and then a young adult as they leave your home. You have to adjust. And so as you think about your team that you're leading, see the parallel in your home and saying, what season are they in? What do they need now? Recognizing that their needs will change over time. And I just, oh, that is such wisdom that you've already dropped here. Like we could be done in just a few minutes and be like, there's your wisdom for the day. Go forth and apply. But I know we have more. So thank you so much for what you're sharing. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership. And through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. Now, back to the show. Let's dive into the strengths. You talked about how strength-based leadership is what you're passionate about, of how you help leaders in their strengths. So can you explain to us, let's define that a little bit. Define what strengths-based leadership looks like in practice.
Sure. It is, and we're going to continue the conversation of what we've already been talking about, but it's understanding the person at a deeper level. And it's also having the language in which to communicate it.
Ooh.
One thing that I've realized is a very, very simple example. In fact, I just talked to a young lady about this a week ago, and she was getting ready to go in for a job interview. And she was saying, she's a little bit on the younger side. I'm a little bit on the older side. And so she was saying, do you have any advice for me? And I said, sure. What are your strengths? And she kind of fumbled a little bit, which I think most of us do when we're asked, what are your strengths? What do you bring to the table? We know we have value. We know we have something to contribute, but we sometimes have a harder time clearly defining it and explaining it. And so we talked for just a few minutes and I said, okay, so here are some things that are good about you, strong about you. Here's what you bring to the table. Find some ways to clearly be able to communicate it and how it applies to the position that you're applying for. How can you bring your strengths to their team? Hey, this is, I am Shawn Richards. If I were to go in and I'll give a quick example and I'll use me as the example. If I were to apply for a position, we'll make up whatever position you want. It doesn't really matter. And if I were applying at your company, Bethany, and you were to say, Shawn, what are some of your strengths? What do you bring to the table? I would start with something like this. I would say, I am a person who loves operations and consistency. And I love to create systems around that help us to be consistent and deliver consistent, reliable results to the customer. I'm also one that likes to include others. I like team collaboration. I love collaborative listening. I love to share my ideas, but I love hearing other people's ideas. I love to develop other people. I like to work in a team environment where I can help others to grow and develop. And I find great satisfaction in helping other people succeed and grow and find a success or achievement in their lives and in their career goals. And you get the idea.
Yeah.
But being able to communicate that in clear language that ties to the position. And that's really something that not just during the application and the hiring process, but it really should continue on a fairly consistent basis throughout your job, throughout your time with a company, or really throughout your life, is to always be asking yourself, what am I doing right now? What are my strengths? And always be thinking, how do these connect with what I'm doing right now? And I love that you brought up about parenting and marriage and some of those things, because when you start to develop those habits of thinking that way, it starts to permeate everything that you do, whether you are in your marriage and you're talking about your kids, whether it's in community service, maybe you're on a local service board, maybe it's part of your church, or maybe it is part of your business and your leadership, but being able to identify and then really be able to clearly communicate, this is who I am and this is what I bring to the table. That is strengths-based leadership.
I love it so much. And, in thinking about that, I can't help but think if you take a hot second to reflect on yourself and find your strengths, you're going to find more peace in your big life calling. So many people grapple with the question of, I work at a job, I get a paycheck, right? I just have a job. What is my purpose in life? I think they're asking that existential question, but they don't stop and say, what do people say I'm good at? And I don't mean sports. Oh, you're talented at baseball. I mean, exactly what you're saying. What do you bring to the table? Problem solving, inclusivity, collaboration. And that is like your calling in life of it doesn't really matter where you're planted, job title or organization, or in different roles of professional, community, church, family. Those are your strengths, and you bring them to the table, and you're going to find peace in that longing for purpose in your life because you know what you're called to do. It may not look like the title and the paycheck that you had always hoped, but you have peace because you have calling of, I could tell you what mine are, just like you were explaining some of yours. Mine is encouragement. I love being the cheerleader for people. I mean, and that's just in the hardest of times, I just love cheering you on and reminding people of who they are and the value that they have. And I have found that it doesn't matter the job that I have or the title that I have, and definitely the paycheck that I've had. That's what I tend to bring to the table, no matter what. And I love it. So I think what you're saying is going to help you flourish in work, but man, it's going to help you flourish in life, period.
Oh, very much so. And I love that you brought that up, Bethany, because first of all, I do see that in you. We don't know each other super well, but you are, and I think that that's what drives you and has driven you to start and do this podcast that you're doing is because you want to encourage people. You want to encourage leaders. I love that. So I can totally see that in you.
Well, thank you so much. In thinking about, I love that you were talking about in the beginning and all through this, you have talked a lot about building up leaders, especially those emerging leaders. So again, can you define what you mean by emerging leader? And now let's talk
Sure.
about how do we support them? How do we grow them up into their strengths? Let's dive into emerging
You
leaders.
bet. Emerging leaders, it's a very loose definition, so I want to be a little bit careful about putting restrictions on the ages. But generally speaking, it's about 25 to 35 year olds who are in maybe a first or second time leadership position. And they're now in this opportunity to lead. It may just be a small team, maybe it's more like a team leader, that type of a setting. But they're experiencing leadership for the first time even if they've read about it, they've certainly been a part of a team and have watched other leaders, but now they themselves are experiencing it for the first time. These are the individuals that have a very bright future. So I like to think of high potential emerging leaders. They're coming into their own and they're ambitious. They want to be good leaders. That's something that for whatever reason, sometimes in our society we tend to downplay a desire to lead. We think that that's arrogant. We think that that's bad. But if we understand how we can lead, that's where it can be a real contributing concept. I contribute to the world around me. Whether you hold the title or not, you can
Amen.
still, you can still be a leader.
Hmm.
Obviously, we respect those with the title and that they make the final decision, but we can still lead. We can still develop ourselves so that when you are in that position with the title, you can be more effective in your leadership. And so the idea is with these high potential emerging leaders, let's help them learn how to lead more effectively as soon as we can to accelerate that self-understanding, that self-awareness, that emotional intelligence, all of those things so that as they're advancing through their career, we can do two things. Number one, we can help that emerging leader know what kind of roles they should pursue. What style of leadership do they have? I like to call it their leadership signature. What is their signature, their unique way of leading? And that's going to help them know these are the kinds of roles that I want to lead. And then, of course, the second one, but a little more obvious, it's how can I lead? How can
Hmm.
I do that when I am in those leadership positions? How can I influence the people that I lead? And so emerging leaders have the bright future ahead of them. They're not the crusty old folks that are in the C-suite already. No
Yeah.
offense to them, of course, because these same principles apply to them as well. But
Hmm.
for whatever reason, over the years, as I've been studying, researching, and developing all of these tools and assessments to help leaders, I have found myself always thinking about these younger leaders and what can we do to help them. That's just where my heart goes. And so I've just in the last year, really, I've made the decision I'm just going to go all in on these future leaders. Some of them are current leaders, but just
Hmm.
generally speaking, our future leaders, society, company, whatever it may be.
I love it so much. I feel like God has given you the eye to notice those people, right? So often, and in different leadership, just like we have different strengths, strengths can also mean that we have a different lens. I wear glasses, a different set
Mhm.
of lens to see things differently in organizations, which is a good thing. We want different
Mhm.
perspectives. But it is important to learn the art of noticing who are your high potential people that you need to pour into all of your people. Everybody deserves to have a value added to them. But who are those that they have the skill set that you need to pour into to build, because now they're going to grow their influence. And leadership is
Right.
influence. It's what John Maxwell says, and I 100% agree. And so you're like, ooh, they're going to have a lot of influence. Let's make sure that we, raise them up with the skill set of how to use that influence well in their strengths area. And I just love that God has given you that eye to notice those emerging leaders. And for those of us who may have a strength in a different area, it is important to learn how to put on that lens of perspective, even if it's just, being intentional, putting it on your calendar. Hey, have a 5-second conversation with another leader in the organization. Who are our high potentials? Now, a lot of evaluation in organizations, a lot of evaluation programs make you define your hypos.
Right. Right.
But still, even if they do, I mean, don't just like check a box. Really have an intentional conversation about how you can
Mhm.
help them. So, what do you think emerging leaders need to hear most or first?
Good question. First, they have value. That's the
Mm.
first thing. You have value. You have something to contribute. I believe very, very firmly, one of my little personal mantras is everybody has something to contribute.
Oh,
And
that's
a really strong servant leader of that style will reach deeply to help an individual see that and to help that other individual really become aware of what it is that they can contribute. Something that I learned in my strengths training, I'm a certified strengths coach, specifically with Gallup. Um, we all do this. As we grow and we get into adulthood and especially a little bit older, we get into our 30s and our 40s, what we do well, it's so natural to us. We don't realize that we do it
mm,
well. We sometimes don't even realize that other people struggle to do something that we find, oh, that's just easy. Think of a public speaker. Somebody is very natural. They're very comfortable speaking in front of others. Other people are not. They have to work at it. But there's a whole lot of other things. But that's the first thing is that you have something to contribute. And it's okay to take time to discover what that is that really motivates you and where you contribute. That is important to understand that everybody has something, and that's part of the fun, if I were to say it that way, of life and growing and continuing to learn about yourself is to find out how else can I contribute in a positive way to the world around me? What value
mhm,
can I bring? Because it's there, but sometimes we get into these little tracks, if you will, in life where we're kind of following the steps. And I'm not trying to knock on education at all, but that's the way it is. Take these classes to get the
mhm.
degree. Good things to know. Those are helpful. They're not bad. But boy, I wish we would spend a little bit more time helping people see in everyday life how they contribute. So that's probably, the first, perhaps best thing. Perhaps I'm answering both questions at the same time, but that's what I would love to see all people, but especially these emerging young people understand. You have value. You have something to contribute. Let's explore. Let's go discover that. Let's go find out what that is.
I love it. And, I love that you're talking about strength finders too. So, if anybody listening, if you have not done some sort of strength finding personality type assessment, there's several out there. Definitely take that to see what you can learn about yourself. But it's not just about you, it's also learning about other people and how you communicate now and engage and interact. Because as you were talking about strengths, about things that come naturally, 100%, how many times do we hear, well, he or she should know? They should know
Yeah,
how to do this. And, one begs the question, is there clarity, before that statement of did they know the expectation? But number two is you cannot assume that just because you know how to do something and it comes easier for you that any Tom, Dick, or Harry in your organization can do that as well. Like that's
that's
why we
right.
require training and coaching.
Well, and it's also hopefully it's a good clarification to remind everybody that's watching or listening. There is a difference between strengths and skills. Anybody
Hmm.
can learn skills, But for some of us, we have natural strengths and we want to layer. That's the idea. Find out what motivates you, find out what your strengths are, and then on top of that, add the skills. Add those things that help us amplify and accelerate our strengths. And that to me is when you're in a zone, when you just know it, that's the alignment that you want. And then you can apply your motivation, your strengths, and your skills to anything. And that's what I can tell. I'm getting
Woo.
very excited because that's what's so cool about it.
I feel like you just took us to a whole nother level thinking about that. You have strengths and then you have skills. Anybody can learn skills, but strengths are going to be a little bit more independent of what you bring to the table. I love that. And so we got to think about both. So, you know, as I'm thinking about how can I notice emerging leaders, how can I pour into them and bring out their strengths and develop these skills and all that? What are some common obstacles for us older leaders whenever we try to build up the emerging leaders? What are some obstacles that old people like me face whenever we're trying to build up the next generation?
I think that this is the technical term. I use the word projection. What we tend to think is what worked for me must work for you.
Oh,
The strengths that I have
yeah,
must be the strengths that you have,
yeah.
because that's, you used the word lens earlier, referring to glasses and whatnot, but that's how we see things. And
Hmm.
that can be a big obstacle. And as parents, we do it to our kids. And we have
Yeah.
to constantly be, I have to, my wife and I talk about this frequently with our two daughters is, hey, we got to be a little bit careful. They live in a very different world, even though we're in the same world right now. We're looking at it from, I remember when I was your age and
Yeah.
we didn't have all this technology and we didn't have this, that, or the other thing.
Hmm.
And that's our perspective. From their perspective, they grew up with it. It's part of life.
Yeah.
It's just there. And they don't even realize that there was a time they know up here, but they don't feel it. They don't remember it. They didn't experience it, that it's something different. And so it's the same way when we're trying to lead a team. We want to help each person understand, and we have to recognize it ourselves. They may learn a little bit differently. And that's part of the reason why I started. I don't want to go too far into this, but the Sapphire Sky leadership development system is based around that philosophy that we learn about ourselves, we discover about ourselves, and then we customize the development plan to us, to our individual needs and our strengths. And that's where I feel like a lot of leadership development has been lacking a little bit.
Hmm.
So that's where some of us that are a little bit older that have gone through certain experiences, we need to make sure that we blend in the life experience to share and inspire and encourage the younger leaders, but not use those as handcuffs either, to make sure that we're helping them see, hey, take my experience, blend it in with yours, take other experiences from maybe your peers or colleagues. Ultimately, you've got to find your path. We're not saying we're abandoning you at all.
Yeah.
It's just find your way and use all these other things, but avoid the temptation as a more senior leader, avoid the temptation to tell a younger leader, this is the path that you must follow because hey, it worked for me and look how great I turned out.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Eh, that was just so good. And I needed to hear it again. Just the more, I'll call us senior leaders.
I like
Be
it.
careful of projection.
Mhm.
That what worked for you and your path is the same path they need to go on. Ultimately, you're handing them a machete and you're teaching them how to use it so that they can carve their own path and they can learn wisdom from you. This is how not to cut yourself as
Right.
you go down chopping
Right.
your own path.
That's
Oh,
right.
so good. So, Shawn, as we wrap up, what are some key takeaways for our listeners that they can apply and grow in their leadership? Or, in your words, what are some rapid fire leadership insights that our audience can take away today?
Learn your strengths, learn how to communicate them. And
Oh,
then through that process, ironically, what's great about it is when you're learning about yourself and you're becoming more self aware, it just follows that you become aware of others and you
mm,
start to realize, hey, my strengths don't necessarily translate over to the other person. And that just naturally makes you a more effective person. And then in a leadership role, a more effective leadership or a more effective leader in that role.
that's amazing. Such good advice. Thank you for wrapping that up for us. Now, I want to ask you the opposite. What is one poor decision that you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, come on, leader, don't do this one thing. You're better than that. What is the one thing?
I laugh because part of the reason why I'm so passionate about all of this is because I am a product of what I should not have done as a younger leader. And that's compare yourself. That's exactly what I realized. It was so liberating. It was probably, I'm 55 right now. It's probably about 10, 12 years ago. So I was in my early to mid 40s when I had this revelation almost. It was almost this spiritual revelation from God that said, Shawn, quit comparing yourself to everybody else. Yes, you can learn and you can draw inspiration from them, but you don't have to be like them. You
Mm.
are your own person. Stop comparing yourself. Learn from others, yes. Admire others, yes. Respect others, yes. But you are your own person. I have given you gifts, I have given you talents. Develop those in the way that it was intended. So the short version is don't compare yourself to others and let that rob you of who you are.
That is so good, Shawn. I'm going to need everybody right now, however you're listening, to pause, go back 30 seconds, and listen to that one more time. Do not compare yourselves to others. God made you as an individual with individual strengths and gifts. Go use them. All right, Shawn, thank you so much for just talking to us today. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your work, all of the things that you're doing, your projects, and where can they go buy your book?
Sure, I appreciate that. You can buy the book at Amazon.com, Rapid Fire Leadership. And my name's Shawn. I go by Shawn J. Richards on the author, so you might have to put the J in there. That's also where you can find me on LinkedIn, Shawn J. Richards. And I also have a website, thefirst50project.com. For all those emerging leaders who'd like to learn more, I'd love to sit down and talk with you and see how we can help you. And then also Blue Sky Biz Consulting. That's Blue Sky Biz, B-I-Z, consulting.com is another website you can go to.
Awesome. And I will have all of those in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see them on the screen. But thank you so much, Shawn, for just helping
Thank
us with
you.
rapid fire leadership, strengths based leadership, and how to build up the next generation. It is so important. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bethany.
All right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Jude 1, verse 22. And of some have compassion, making a difference.